Hello everyone and welcome back to Age of Nagash, which is a channel dedicated to Age of Sigmar. So it's in the middle of the week, so I don't usually make videos, but I have just gone onto Warhammer community and I've just seen there is a other preview for the Beasts of Chaos battle tome. So I thought I have to do a video on this because, as you can probably tell in the other video I made, I'm pretty excited about this release. So in this article, they talk about the allegiance abilities for the army and a couple of other changes and how the army is going to work. So what I'm going to do is I've only quickly scanned through it, so I'm going to go through it again and just sort of almost read it from the first time while doing this video to you guys, so I can sort of share my sort of excitement for it whilst I'm reading it, if you see what I mean. So anyway, we get straight into it. Now the first bit is talking about a very nice guy called Rue who works for the Warhammer community and his passion for Beastmen, as he has been collecting them for what seems to be a very long time, and for a long time when Beastmen weren't very good, so effectively the entirety of Age of Sigmar apart from the start maybe. So he goes on to say that how he's really passionate about this. He's had a bit of influence on the battle tome, about how the Beastman sort of lore works, and he is really excited to basically use his army he's been building over the last few years, and how he looks forward to taking them into the Beasts of Chaos Allegiance. And as he has written this article, it is quite nicely worded and you can really see his enthusiasm for the army. He also mentions the lore for the Beasts of Chaos, and he's sort of saying how they see themselves above the mortal followers of Chaos, such as Slaves of Darkness, Khorne, Bloodbound, Nurgle, Rotbringers, things like that, as they see those like mortal followers as sort of like posers and nerds, really, who are, like, in his words, way too keen as to, like, worshipping the Chaos gods and serving them. And the Beasts of Chaos see Chaos very much more as a nature, as a sort of inevitable force, that it's not that it cannot be contained, but it is actually instead the way of life and how everything is part of chaos. And they very much obviously oppose order and even like death and maybe destruction a little bit, as particularly order anyway will try and put, as in the Beasts of Chaos words, a mask over reality and try and say things are civilized. There's a certain way of doing things, and saying that, chaos is sort of like the invasion into how, the universe is meant to work. And Beasts of Chaos are basically just saying that's a load of rubbish. Chaos is the way forward, and it's not that it's just the way forward. It's always been around. It's always how things should be done. And believing in civilization is really telling yourself a lie. So yeah, that's just a brief account of what they said about the lore for the Beastmen there, but I thought that was quite interesting, and I look forward to when they talk about it in a bit more depth. So now we go more into the sort of like rule changes, and the first bit of rule change we get is that we're told that a Dragon Ogre Shagoths are now wizards, which is really cool because there is a spell which any wizards from your army know if they are within I think it's 20 inches of a Dragon Ogre unit, and that spell is called Summon Lightning, and it's essentially a spell that allows you to heal the Dragon Ogre unit, which I believe is D3 wounds they heal, and I think they get to reroll failed wound rolls as well, that unit, so that's a pretty good spell, especially with a large unit of Dragon Ogres. But the only problem there was before is if you wanted to take a pure Dragon Ogre army, you really only had the choice of two different units, which was the Dragon Ogres and the Shagoths. And before allies came into it, before the General's Handbook 2017, if you just wanted to take your Dragon Ogre Allegiance, you couldn't have a wizard in it, so you would never use that spell. But now the Shagoth is a wizard, so that means he can do the spell. And yes, in the Beast of Chaos battle tome, you would be able to use like a Bray Shaman as the wizard to be able to do that spell. That's very true, and that's all good, but it's nice that the Shagoth is a wizard now, because obviously he can do Mystic Shield and Arcane Bolt and summon malign spells and sorcery, but it's also very nice because it sort of just fits in with the theme, if you see what I mean. If you want to have just a Dragon Ogre army and mix in a couple of other things in there, you're going to keep the theme by having your wizard as a Shaggoth opposed to a Bray Shaman if that's what you want to do. So that's the first little change we hear about the rules, and then we go into much more detail and onto bigger subjects because that's quite specific. And what that is it's saying that Beasts of Chaos will have 4 allegiance abilities, which they say in this article is really good, as most sort of armies only have, you know, 1 allegiance ability, and that's kind of true. But a lot of the newer armies, especially probably over the last year, in all honesty, have had quite a few allegiance abilities. So it's nothing new, but it's nice that we've got 4 rather than them just getting 1. So the 4 are, the first one is the Bray Herd Ambush, which is very, very similar to what the Bray Herds have at the moment in their allegiance ability. And I don't know how different it is, so apart from a couple of changing keywords, let me know, but I'll just read it out. So instead of setting up a Bray Herd unit on the battlefield, you can place it to one side and say that it's set up in ambush as a reserve unit. You can set up 1 reserve unit in ambush for each Beast of Chaos unit you have set up on the battlefield. At the end of your first movement phase, you must set up all friendly reserve units that are in ambush on the battlefield, wholly within 6 inches of the board edge and more than 9 inches from any enemy units. Any reserve units cannot be set up are slain. So I think this is fairly similar to what it used to be. I'm not too sure if you had to have at least half of your army on the table and the other half you could have off the table. Not too sure that works in the terms of how many units you can set up in ambush. I think it might have been before you can set up how many you want, but it might have been like this. But what is quite nice here is that it's not for every Bray Herd unit you have on the table, so you could just, I don't know, if you wanted to do a very heavy Bulgur army and have lots of Minotaurs on the table, then you could set up your Bray Herds that might be things like your Ongor Raiders, which are, you know, very light units but are very much skirmishing units off the battlefield that can be summoned onto the board edges. So there might be some good combinations there, and it's something that we all know fairly well what the essentially the Beastmen could do for a little while now. So that is your Bray Herd sort of Pacific Allegiance ability, and then we move on to what's going to be targeted at the War Herd, which is called Blood Gorge. At the end of the combat phase, if any attacks made by a War Herd unit in that combat phase destroyed any enemy units, heal D3 wounds allocated to that War Herd unit. So I'm sort of looking at this as, when I was first reading it, I thought, oh, this is really good. You know, if you slay an enemy model, that unit heals, you know, D3 wounds because they drink the blood or however it works. But you have to wipe out a whole enemy unit. Now, that's probably not going to be incredibly hard with your War Herd units, because if you've got big units of Bulgurs, they can probably tear through quite a lot of stuff, especially if they've got like double-handed axes, because they can do a lot of damage. But there are some quite big units out there in Age of Sigmar now, so being able to tear through a whole unit in one battle round is probably going to be quite hard, especially if it's a fresh unit of a, you know, a big block. But if you've been in combat with it the round before, the next round you're in combat with it, you might be able to wipe it out and you'll heal D3 wounds. So I look at this as not amazing, but it's an extra benefit you're going to get probably a couple of times throughout the game. So, you know, it is a nice welcome addition, but I wouldn't try and like get it off continuously. So yeah, that's that. It's like I say, it's a nice passive ability basically they have. And then the next one is Creatures of the Storm, and if you haven't guessed this already, this is aimed towards the Thunderscorn, and obviously when I say Thunderscorn I mean, you know, your Dragon Ogres essentially. So it says, at the start of your hero phase, roll a dice. Each friendly Thunderscorn unit more than 3 inches from an enemy unit can move a distance in inches equal to the roll, but cannot move within 3 inches of enemy units. I think personally for me this is my favourite one out of all 3 of the allegiance abilities we've looked at so far, just because it's an automatic, you know, D6 movement you're getting, you know, as long as you're not within 3 inches of the enemy for your Dragon Ogres. And so I want to try and run like a Dragon Ogre heavy army because I think they're awesome. It will be a great bonus because currently at the moment they move 8 inches, I believe. So 8 inches is already a fantastic movement, but now you add in, you know, d6 onto that, and then the average of a d6 is a 3. So now they're moving 11 inches. That's absolutely huge. And yeah, I think we'll, as a passive ability, that will do a lot more for you than I think the Blood Gorge for the Warherd. So yeah, I am a big fan of that. Nice simple ability, but something that will become useful quite a lot, especially towards the later game where you want to quickly grab objectives. If you've still got a few Dragon Ogres lying about, they could quickly get to an objective, and if the enemy's only got a couple of, you know, straggling, you know, models on that objective, like a couple of 1-win models that can't stand a chance, they're literally just there to hold the objective last turn. If you can get your one Dragon Ogre to those, like I said, those couple enemy models, yeah, they're not going to stand a chance against that Dragon Ogre. So I think this will see a lot of uses throughout the game. And then we move on to the fourth one, and this one's a little bit different because this one's talking about the Herdstone, and I do quite like it, so I'll read through it. I'll tell you what it does. It's a little bit longer, this one. So the first ability it has is the Entropic Lodestone. I think that's how it's pronounced. We'll go with that. So subtract 1 from save rolls for attacks that target units within 6 inches of this terrain feature. At the start of each battle round after the first, add 6 inches to the range of this ability. Beasts of Chaos units are not affected by this ability. So this is very good. Obviously the first round, unless the enemy does some sort of deep striking or something to your, you know, your territory, it's not really come into it. But in the later rounds, especially how the aura of this Herdstone will grow, it will cover quite a large amount of the board, because by, you know, the 5th battle round, that's already a 30-inch range, like radius around this thing. And what's nice about this ability as well is it doesn't say units wholly within whatever range of this, you know, Herdstone. It's just within, so it's very nice. You can just tag enemy units, so it's going to give you, especially towards the later game, huge board control really, especially if the enemy Ewolf. To be fair, even if they have good saves and they're relying on their good saves, this is going to hamper them pretty badly. And then even if the enemy, like on the other hand of the spectrum, has not very good saves at all, like if I take my Flesh-Eater Courts for example, where I go very heavy on Cryptoids, Crypt Flares, if they're 5-up saves, now they've got 6-up saves, and then if the enemy has Rend, they're not getting any save now apart from the, you know, their Deathless save. That's pretty nasty. And, you know, if we don't take the Flesh-Eater Courts as an example, we take another army that's got 5-up saves. Yeah, like I say, you make them -1 to their save, and then on a 6-up, and as soon as the enemy, well, I say the enemy, as soon as you chuck Rend at them, you're going to not give them a save at all. And unless they're Death or another Allegiance that has like a Death save, that's it. They're not going to get a chance. So yeah, I'm a big fan of that. That's a really nice ability. I think particularly when the Beasts of Chaos first come out, the enemy's going to overlook this ability, because you'll read them through it. You'll tell them, they'll probably ask, what does that, you know, Herdstone do? And you'll say, oh, it subtracts 1 to your save rolls if you're within 6 inches of it. And then they'll probably think, oh, that's quite a small range. And then you say, yes, but for every subsequent battle round, it extends by 6 inches. They'll probably think, oh, all right, that's, you know, I'll try and keep that in mind. But to be honest, as the game goes on, they'll probably forget about it, especially how it's not really going to affect them the first couple of rounds. And then when it does affect them, that's probably just when they remember and think, oh crap, I forgot that that's within range of that now. I'm -1 to my save. So I'm a big fan of that, and I think that'll have a lot of usage. Just bear in mind though, is that it doesn't say enemy units within range are -1 to their save rolls. Well, it says subtract 1 to the save rolls, so essentially -1. That's what it says. So bear in mind, if you take allies in your army that are not Beasts of Chaos, because Beasts of Chaos are the only, you know, keyword that's exempt from this, anything else, we'll take that subtract 1 from save rolls. So your allies, I don't know, let's say you ally in a Chaos Sorcerer Lord on Manticore, And I don't know why you would ally him into this army, because I don't even know if he can go in the army as in taken as an ally. But if you did put him in this army, he does not have the Beast of Chaos keyword, so he will have to subtract 1 to his save rolls if he's within range of the Hearthstone. So it's just something to bear in mind with your allies there. And particularly if they're, you know, smaller, I don't know, hero or wizard that doesn't have the best save anyway and only has like 5 wounds, you know, it's worth bearing in mind, as they could, if they get targeted, they can maybe die quite easily. So the next ability is Locus of Savagery, and this is Beasts of Chaos units wholly within 6 inches of this terrain feature do not take battle shock tests. At the start of each battle round, after the first, add 6 to the range of this ability. So firstly, if you don't have to take battle shock tests, that's absolutely fantastic. It means that you're not having to use your command points on Inspiring Presence, as, let's face it, in today's world of Age of Sigmar, how Inspiring Presence has changed. It's not a case of you put it on where it's like, oh, just in case they need it, it'll be a, these guys really need it, otherwise they're all going to go away and I'm fucked, essentially. So not having to worry about battle shock is absolutely fantastic in my opinion. Yes, you have to be wholly within 6 inches. Obviously, the first battle round, unless you essentially hug this Hearthstone, you're not really going to get the benefit of it. But like the previous ability we just talked about, of the making the enemy subtract to their save rolls, this will extend by 6 inches in each battle round. So the first turn, maybe 2 turns, unless you're sitting back a bit, it might not really come into play much, not having to do battle test while you're within that range of that terrain feature, well, the Hearthstone. But as the game goes on, particularly the later turns, so anywhere from probably turn 3, turn 4, turn 5, it's going to play a very big part, particularly how Beastmen, let's face it, they don't have the best bravery going. So for them, not to do battle shock is fantastic. And I mean, like I say, it's wholly within 6 inches, doesn't sound that much, but when it gets to turn 3, that's wholly within 18 inches, which is quite a large area. It's the same as, you know, like you think about a Bloodsecrator's, his standard banner, if he's not in the Gore Chosen, is 18-inch range of that, not having to do battleship test. And I'm not too sure, to be fair, if his one is wholly within range of him or just within range. So I don't know if, like the Bloodbounder, they have to be completely within 18 inches of him each unit, or they can tag. But it's still a big radius, and the Hearthstone is quite a big model as well, so I have a big footprint. And that is the last ability for the Hearthstone, and I'm happy with that. And I say it's the last ability, but actually there is another one, and this goes on to summoning. So it doesn't tell us much about the summoning here. It's quite vague, but it says you know, you can sacrifice basically your cheapest guys called you know, the Ungors, and you can sacrifice them to attract like bigger creatures like monsters or more sort of elite units. And it doesn't tell us how it works, but there's a point system, so it's quite like the Seraphon summoning, or you know, like the Blades of Khorne summoning, as you tally points, and when you reach a certain amount of points you can summon a specific unit. So for example, if you want to summon 3 Zangor Skyfires, that's going to cost you 10 points. If you want to summon a Crimea, that's going to cost you 10 points. If you want to summon a I don't know, a Cygor, that's going to cost you 9 points. You want to summon 10 Zangors, that's going to cost you 9 points, and so on and so on. But that's all we really know about it. We know it has something to do with the Hearthstone and sacrificing your Ungors. We don't know how you achieve these points, so I don't know if it's you sacrifice D3 Ungors, and for every one you sacrifice, so basically what you roll on that D3 is how many points you get. That might be how it works. If you do it within range of the Hearthstone, that's how I'm sort of thinking it'll work. But I don't know if that is how it works, because if you want to do that, I mean, if you do that and you sacrifice 9 Ungor in total, then you can summon a giant, what feels a bit out of proportion. But we'll have to see how it works. And I am very much looking forward to seeing how they detail that later on. So those are the allegiance abilities all in all. You do get all of them, I do believe. It's not like you pick one. So that is nice. out of all of them, my favourite one is obviously the Herdstone. I think it would be an offence to say it's not the Herdstone at this point. The Creatures of the Storm for the Thunderscorn, it's my second favourite. Now this is going to be biased because I do really like the Dragon Ogre models, but I see it as just passively being really good. The Blood Gorge for the Warherds, like I say, I'm not thinking too much about it, but why not? It might be really, it will help you out probably more times than you think in the game. And then the first one we looked at, the Brayherd Ambush, I'm sure this is good. I haven't really played around with this before because I haven't played with Brayherd at all. So I don't know. You guys out there have potentially played with Brayherd, and if you have, you will know a hell of a lot more about this than me. But I feel like compared to like the Stormcast, I can't remember what it's called now. Is it Heralds of the Storm or something, where they can lightning down onto battlefield, and that's just in any turn more than 9 inches away from the enemy, they can come down. But this one is like it has to be on the first battle round, and it has to be more than 9 inches away from the enemy, and then it has to be within 6 inches of the board edge. And then if they can't set up, and the only reason I would think they can't set up is because you're playing on quite a small board, but if they can't set up, they're counted as being slain. I think on its own, it's pretty good. Gives you some tactical choices and stuff, but I think when you compare it to things like the Stormcast one, it's a lot of a weaker version, but it's a completely different army. This has got stuff what the Stormcasts don't, so it's not a fair comparison, but that's just what I've got in my head. I haven't given it much thought, so I don't want to sound negative about it now, as I might, when I've got the Battlestone in my hands, look through and think, actually no, this will work really well with this ambition unit, and go from there. So I am optimistic about all of these allegiance abilities. And then we move on to what are known as the Greatbrays. So these are essentially a sort of cults within the Beasts of Chaos Battletome. They're your cults, they're your enclaves, they're your, I would think, legions, like legions from Nagash sort of thing. So this is quite interesting. It breaks down the beastmen further, and then you can sort of specify your army to what sort of play style that really suits you. So they are All Herd, Dark Walkers, and Gave Spawn. So what they show us first is the Dark Walkers. So it says Warherd and Thunderscorn units in Dark Walkers armies are considered to have the Brayherd keyword for purposes of the Brayherd Ambush battle trait, which we just sort of talked about, the ambush one. In addition, up to half, rounding up, of the reserve units that are set up in ambush can arrive in your second movement phase instead of your first movement phase. So already that's just the first part of this, and that ability is called Shadow Beasts. So I think this greatly improves that ambush ability, as it allows you to set them on the second battle round, so you're not sort of forced to think, I want to see how the game plays out a little bit, because you can't really do that in the first turn unless your opponent goes first, and then it's your first turn, you can sort of see how they move about. It still feels a little bit too soon to me, so this is very nice. And then it lets you set up your Warherds and your Thunderscorn, and we've talked about how fast your Dragon Ogres can be now, and your Warherd, and as they're particularly your heavy hitters of the army, you don't really want the enemy to pick them off by shooting before you get them into combat, so it could be a way to sort of enhance your chances of getting into the enemy's face before they've shot you to pieces. So the next part of the Shadow Beasts, and these, what they do say are these Greatbrays are a lot like Storm Hosts. So if you've looked at the Stormcast Battletome, you'll know that if you want to pick Hammers of Sigmar or the Hallow Knights as an example, you get additional abilities. Like here you get the Shadow Beasts for the Dark Walkers, but you also have a certain artifact of power you will have to take, which will be for your first Dark Walker hero. And what it is for this one is the Desolate Shard. So once per battle at the start of your hero phase, the bearer can use this Desolate Shard if they are within 3 inches of a terrain feature. If they do so, roll a dice for each enemy unit within 1 inch of that terrain feature. On a 4+, that enemy unit suffers D3 mortal wounds. So my first thought on this is it can be good. Obviously it depends on the size of the train feature. If it's a massive one, it's going to be really good, especially if there's a lot of enemy units around it. But I was sort of first thinking, comparing this to the Knight Heralder from the Stormcast, who's got a trumpet that does a very similar ability. I thought the trumpet was definitely better, but now, thinking about it, I believe the trumpet affects Stormcast units as well, so it can damage its own guys. However, this one, the Desolate Shard, only affects enemy units, so it's quite nice. However, for me, when I take artifacts, I want to know that that artifact's going to be useful for me in the game. Even if it's just a light passive ability, it's always going to continuously help me. However, this Desolate Shard, if you think, right, okay, now's the moment I'm going to pick that train feature and try and make the enemy around it, take damage. There's a 50-50 chance it won't even go off. So if it doesn't even go off, it's essentially a complete waste of an artifact. So I think this should definitely be more like a free up to get it off, at least. When I say at least, I mean I think that should be the highest you need to roll to get this off, because it's not even that good, because it's probably a lot of the time you're only going to have 1 or 2 enemy units within 1 inch of this train feature. So I'm not the biggest fan of that artifact, but the Shadow Beast other ability the Dark Walkers have, I think is pretty good. So it might be worth it all in all. Right, we then move on to a little bit of information of the Gave spawn. So its only ability it tells us is Gift of Morgul, and I apologies if that's not pronounced correctly, but I think that is how it's pronounced. So anyway, if a friendly Gave spawn hero is slain, roll a dice before removing the model. On a 2+, 1 Chaos Spawn is added to your army. Set up the Chaos Spawn anywhere on the battlefield within 6 inches of the slain hero. If the hero had the Khorne, Nurgle, Slaanesh or Tzeentch keyword, the same keyword must be chosen for the Chaos Spawn. If they did not, you cannot use the Cursed of the Gods ability to choose the keyword for that Chaos Spawn. Yeah, I mean, this is good because I presume this doesn't cost any points to summon. It won't cost any points because I believe how the new changes work in Age of Sigmar 2nd edition. So it's good when your hero dies. On a 2+, you're going to get another model that I believe has 2d6 attacks, like 4s and 4s I believe, no Rem 1 damage, and then if you roll a double to see how many attacks it gets, it becomes a 3 to hit and a 3 to wound. I think that's how it works. I think that's the attack characteristic for the Chaos Spawn. Chaos Spawn's not the best war score around, shall we say, but you're getting a 3-1 on a 2-up, so it's quite a nice ability. And I believe the Gift of Morgul, this ability sort of ties into the old fantasy lore, because I can't remember the name of him. He might be called Morgul, but I know there was a old fantasy Beastman, Beast Lord, that had a lot to do with like corruption and Chaos Spawn, and how his essence sort of lived on every time he died. So that's quite nice how there's a connection to that, if that is what it is. And then it's also our first hint that we are going to have Beasts of Chaos devoted to certain gods. And when I say that, I don't mean there's going to be new models for these certain Chaos gods, but as someone did point out to me in the last video, I believe it was, that I was completely unaware if the Beastmen from Fantasy, if they could ever devote to certain gods, and they could do. There were Khorne Gors, Pestigors, Slangors, and Zangors. So yeah, that was interesting to hear, and that was from Just a Guy Drawing. So thank you for putting that comment, and yeah, that was interesting to hear. Unfortunately, there's not going to be any new models for these, devoted to certain Chaos gods, but it's nice that you can do it in the rules anyway, and you can sort of, maybe theme your army around it. As the sort of Beast of Chaos army I'm going to be doing will be having a Khorne theme to it. So it's nice to know that I can do that, and there's going to be some rules to reflect it. So it then goes on to talk about a battalion, and this gives us the key of how we are going to get the keywords to devote your Beast of Khorne to a certain god. And the one that gives us here is the Khorne one. So this is cool the brass destroyers, and what you need is 1 to 4 heroes chosen in any combination from the following list: a Beast Lord, Doom Bull, and then you need 3 to 8 units chosen in the combination from the following list: Bestigors, Bullgors, and Gors, and then you need 8 to 0 units chosen from combination from the following list: so Centaurs, Dragon Ogres, and Tuskarl Chariots, and then you can have 0 to 2 Cygors or Gorgons in any combination. So at first when I read that, I thought, oh, that requires quite a bit, this battalion, doesn't it? It doesn't, because you just need one hero and then 3 to 8 of those, units I mentioned, which is not a lot really. 3 units of Gors is not cost you a lot of points at all. And then, if you want to do it Bull Gors or Bestigors, probably not too expensive either. And then the other stuff's optional. The Centaurs, Dragon Ogres, Tuskarls, or Cygors, or Gorgons. You don't have to have it, so this would be probably quite a cheap battalion if you really wanted to, or if you want to make it as build your army around it, it's probably pretty easy to do. You just might want to add in a Brave Shaman or 2 along the way. So, what it says is it only has one ability, apart from turning everything from this battalion to having the Khorne keyword, and the ability it has is you can reroll hit rolls of 1 for attacks made by units from this battalion while they are wholly within 9 inches of another unit from the same battalion. In addition, once per battle in your hero phase, you can choose to unleash the battalion's bestial rage. If you do so, until your next hero phase, you can reroll failed wound rolls for attacks made by units from this battalion while they are wholly within 9 inches of another unit from the same battalion. So when I first read this, I thought it sounded promising, but then you have to be not just within, but wholly within 9 inches of another unit from this battalion. And if you're taking, big units of Gors or even Bestigors, that's going to be hard to try and make sure these guys are all within range of each other, especially wholly within range. It might, unless they're all squashed up, it's pretty impossible. However, just think you just need to have wholly within 9 inches of one of your heroes. So one of your Beast Lords or one of your Doom Bulls, and that should be easy enough, especially if you're taking Bullgors or something, where don't have a huge footprint compared to a huge unit of Gors. Should be fairly achievable, and with not too much effort required, maybe just a little bit of micromanaging. So yeah, I think that battalion could be good, but of course we're going to need to see the changes to the war scrolls for these units, and then we're also going to have to see how much the battalion costs in points and etc. And if the changes to the war scrolls mean, do you really want to be taking Beast Lords or Doom Bulls or Bestigors or Bullgors or Gors? I presume you are going to want to take them, because they sort of form the main bulk for the army, I imagine. So we're going to have to wait to see for that, but it looks pretty promising. And then all it has left to save now is basically, it just says that the Beasts of Chaos have now been given a much needed sort of late game capabilities with how much more effective the Herdstone gets later on in your game, and it gives you now more options to deep strike units with the ambush. How you can, if you take certain things, you can do it on turn 2 now opposed to turn 1, and etc. And then the only thing it really says after that is there will be much more of these articles to come, and there will be a new one tomorrow. So I don't know if I'm going to be able to do the one for tomorrow, but I wanted to do today's one, as I said, because I'm pretty excited about this. And I got home from work and I got a message from someone who told me that they put up a new article, so I thought, yeah, I'm going to have to do a video on this. And I'm not going to lie, this video has gone on for longer than I imagined. But I think it's important to talk about all the new changes, because they actually did tell us quite a lot in this article. So if you haven't already, I do suggest you go and look at it yourself, as it is a nice read. So that's the end of the video, and as always guys, I thank you very much for watching this. I hope you've enjoyed it, and if you had, please like, subscribe and comment down below, and let me know your thoughts on the Beasts of Chaos coming up, what your sort of your hopes, your dreams, and also what you think about the leaks we're getting at the moment. And leaks probably isn't really a word, but the sort of stuff they're teasing us with the Legion abilities. What are your thoughts on them? And if you've also got some experience with Grey Herds before, or War Herds or Beastmen in general, let me know down in the comments as well, and tell me what you think is good about these changes. So until next time guys, I thank you very much for watching, and remember, Nagash is all, and all is one in Nagash.